My name is Dina. I was 26 years old, traveling alone for the first time in my life, chasing a dream of seeing London before I turned 27, and I had saved for almost a year to afford 1 week at a hotel I had seen in a travel magazine years earlier. The hotel was called the Windermere Regency, tucked away on a quiet street near Kensington, an old Victorian building that had been renovated into a 5-star property with marble floors, gold-trimmed mirrors, and a lobby that smelled like fresh lilies and old money. I remember stepping through the revolving doors with my suitcase trailing behind me, feeling like I had stepped into a different century, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I did not know yet that the room they would give me, room 313, would become the most terrifying place I have ever been in my entire life. The check-in process was smooth, almost too smooth. The receptionist, a thin, older man with silver hair combed back and a name tag that simply read Nigel, kept glancing at me in a way that felt strange, not lecherous, but almost pitying, like he knew something I didn't. When I asked for a room on a higher floor with a view, he typed something into his computer, paused, looked at me again, and then said, very quietly, "Room 313 is available, if you'd like it. Great view of the gardens." I said yes without thinking twice, because I did not yet understand that some hotels keep certain rooms empty for reasons they don't advertise, and some staff members only fill those rooms when they run out of other options, or when they simply don't care anymore. Nigel handed me the key card, and as I took it, his fingers lingered on mine for half a second too long, and he said something I brushed off as harmless small talk. "If you hear anything strange tonight, just remember, old buildings settle." I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was uneventful, but the moment the doors opened, I felt a change in the air. A coolness that had no business being there considering the rest of the hotel was warm and perfectly climate-controlled. The hallway leading to room 313 was long, lined with deep red carpet and gold sconces that flickered ever so slightly, though I told myself it was simply an old wiring issue in a historic building. When I reached my door, I noticed something odd immediately. The number plate for 313 looked newer than the others, slightly shinier, as if it had been replaced more recently than the surrounding room numbers. I didn't think much of it then. I slid the key card, the light turned green, and I stepped into what would become the most haunted week of my life. The room itself was stunning, at least at first glance. High ceilings, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, a small sitting area by the window, and a bathroom with a deep soaking tub that looked like something out of a magazine. I set my suitcase down, took a few photos for my family group chat, and told my mother I had arrived safely and the room was gorgeous. She replied with a heart emoji. I remember smiling at my phone, completely unaware that within 24 hours, I would be too afraid to even look at the bathroom door. The first sign that something was wrong came that very first night, around 2 in the morning, when I woke up gasping for air, not because I couldn't breathe, but because I had the overwhelming, bone-deep sensation that someone was standing at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep. I opened my eyes slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I scanned the room. Nothing, no one, just the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. I told myself it was jet lag, a bad dream, the unfamiliarity of a new place. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and eventually fell back asleep, though not peacefully. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted, as if I hadn't slept at all despite being in bed for 8 hours. I went down for breakfast in the hotel's grand dining hall, and as I sat there eating a croissant and sipping coffee, an older woman at the next table, a hotel guest herself, judging by her robe and slippers, leaned over slightly and asked which room I was staying in. When I told her 313, her face changed almost instantly, a flicker of concern crossing her features before she quickly composed herself and said, "Oh, lovely, lovely room, dear," in a tone that did not match her expression at all. I asked her if something was wrong, and she hesitated, glanced around as if checking who might be listening, and then simply said, "Just keep your curtains closed at night," before standing up and leaving her breakfast half finished. I sat there stirring my coffee, feeling a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the London weather outside. I spent that day exploring the city, visiting Buckingham Palace, walking through Hyde Park, taking photos of red telephone booths like every other tourist before me, and for a few hours, I genuinely forgot about the strange feeling from the night before and the old woman's cryptic warning. But when evening came and I found myself walking back toward the hotel, a strange reluctance settled into my chest, a heaviness I couldn't explain, as if some part of me already knew I didn't want to go back into that building. I ignored the feeling, because what else was I supposed to do? I had already paid for the week, and canceling seemed dramatic over nothing more than bad sleep and an odd comment from a stranger. I went up to my room, ordered room service, watched television to keep the silence at bay, and eventually drifted off to sleep with the lamp still on. That second night is when things truly began to unravel. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of someone humming, a low, tuneless melody that seemed to be coming from inside the bathroom. My blood ran cold. I lay perfectly still, straining to listen, telling myself it was the pipes, the plumbing, anything logical, but the humming continued, rising and falling in a way that no pipe could ever replicate. I don't know how long I lay there frozen, too terrified to move, before the humming simply stopped, cutting off mid-note as if someone had pressed pause on a recording. I did not sleep again that night. I sat up against the headboard with my phone flashlight on, staring at the closed bathroom door until the sun finally rose and the darkness outside my window turned into a soft London gray. The following day, I considered changing rooms, or even changing hotels altogether, but there was a strange pull keeping me there, a curiosity mixed with denial that I now recognize as a mistake, but at the time felt like simple stubbornness. I went down to the front desk and mentioned, as casually as I could, that I had heard strange noises in my room. The young woman at the desk this time, not Nigel, gave me a tight, professional smile and said the hotel would send someone to check the plumbing, but her eyes darted to her colleague beside her, and I caught the colleague give the smallest, almost imperceptible shake of the head. No maintenance ever came to my room that day. I waited in the lobby cafe for almost 2 hours, watching the door, and no one showed up. When I asked again later that evening, a different staff member told me the request had been logged and someone would come the next morning. No one ever did, not for the rest of my stay. By the third night, I had started sleeping with every light in the room on, the television playing quietly for background noise, anything to keep the silence from creeping in. But some things cannot be kept out by light or sound. I woke up that night not from a noise, but from cold. An unnatural, bone-deep cold that had nothing to do with the room's temperature, which the thermostat still confirmed was a comfortable 22 degrees. My breath, I swear to you, was visible in the air above me, small clouds forming and dissolving as I exhaled, and my body was shaking uncontrollably, not from fear yet, but from the physical cold itself. I sat up, and that is when I saw her, standing near the window, a woman in what looked like an old-fashioned nightgown, her hair long and dark, hanging over her face so I could not see her features. She wasn't moving, she wasn't doing anything except standing there, facing the window, her back to me, as still as a photograph. I don't know how long I stared at her before I found the strength to scream, and the moment sound left my mouth, she was simply gone, vanished as though she had never been there at all, and the room's temperature returned to normal so quickly it felt like my mind had betrayed me. I did not sleep at all that night. I sat in the corner of the room with my back against the wall, phone clutched in my hand, ready to call for help, though I had no idea who I would even call or what I would say. When morning finally came, I marched down to the front desk, and this time I demanded to speak with the manager. A woman introduced herself as the hotel's operations director, a composed, elegant woman named Margaret, who listened to my account with an expression that was far too calm for what I was describing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something that has stayed with me ever since. Room 313 has a history, and I am sorry no one told you before you checked in. We usually try to keep that room for guests who won't ask questions. I asked her what she meant, and after a long hesitation, she finally told me the story of the room, a story the hotel had spent decades trying to keep quiet. Margaret explained that in the 1970s, before the building had been converted into a hotel, it had been a private residence owned by a wealthy family. The daughter of that family, a young woman in her 20s named Eleanor, had been kept confined to what was now room 313 for the final years of her life, suffering from a severe and misunderstood mental illness that her family found embarrassing and shameful. She was rarely allowed visitors, rarely allowed outside, and eventually, according to hotel legend, she died in that very room under circumstances the family never fully explained to authorities, something between illness, neglect, and what some longtime staff members whispered was closer to something far darker. When the building became a hotel decades later, strange occurrences began almost immediately in that specific room. Guests reporting cold spots, humming, the sensation of being watched, and occasionally, like what happened to me, an actual sighting of a woman standing near the window, always facing outward, as though she were still waiting, even in death, for someone to let her leave. Margaret told me the hotel had considered permanently closing the room several times over the years, but ownership kept overriding the decision because room 313 remained one of their most requested rooms for its view, and closing it meant losing revenue they weren't willing to sacrifice for what management publicly referred to as simply old building superstition. I should have left the hotel that very morning. I know that now. But Margaret offered me a substantial discount to stay the remainder of my trip, along with a promise to move me to a different room on a lower floor. And foolishly, exhausted and disoriented from lack of sleep, I agreed, thinking a room change would fix everything. They moved my belongings to room 108 that afternoon, a bright, ordinary space with none of the eerie architecture of the room above, and for one night, finally, I slept peacefully, deeply, the kind of sleep that erases doubt and makes you believe the worst is over. I woke up on my 5th day in London feeling like myself again, refreshed, almost embarrassed by how frightened I had allowed myself to become. I spent that day at the Tower of London, admiring the crown jewels, laughing at street performers near the Thames, feeling almost normal. But that night, back in room 108, at exactly 3 in the morning, the exact time the disturbances had always begun in room 313, I woke up to find the bathroom light on, though I distinctly remembered turning it off before bed, and beneath the door, I could see a shadow, the unmistakable shape of feet, standing perfectly still on the other side. I did not move. I did not breathe. I watched that shadow for what felt like an eternity, waiting for it to shift, to walk away, to prove it was simply my imagination playing tricks in the darkness, but it remained utterly still, and then, slowly, impossibly, the door began to creak open on its own, inch by inch, revealing nothing but darkness inside, despite the light I had clearly seen shining beneath the door only moments before. I grabbed my phone, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard it physically hurt, and I ran, barefoot, out of that room and down the hallway, banging on the door of hotel security until someone finally answered. I refused to go back inside that room, not even to collect my belongings, and the hotel, likely fearing I would tell my story to every travel website and review platform in existence, agreed to have staff retrieve my things while I waited, shaking, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, in the lobby until sunrise. I spent my final 2 nights in London at a completely different hotel across the city, a modern, sterile, unremarkable building with none of the charm of the Windermere Regency, and I have never in my life been so grateful for unremarkable. Before I left London for good, curiosity, or perhaps some need for closure, drove me to do a bit of research on my own. I found old newspaper archives, digitized records from local historical societies, and buried within them a small article from 1976 about the sudden and unexplained death of a young woman named Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of a prominent London family, found deceased in her bedroom under what the coroner's report vaguely described as unusual circumstances, ruled inconclusive due to insufficient evidence, at the very same address that would later become the Windermere Regency Hotel. There was a photograph included in the article, grainy and faded with age, but unmistakable, a young woman with long dark hair, standing beside a window in what I immediately recognized, with a chill that ran straight through my entire body, as the exact window of room 313. I flew home 3 days later than originally planned, having spent my last remaining days simply trying to feel normal again, trying to convince myself that trauma and exhaustion had exaggerated everything I experienced. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. To this day, I cannot sleep in a hotel room without checking every corner, without leaving a light on, without feeling that same creeping unease the moment darkness settles in around me. I still think about Eleanor sometimes, about a young woman locked away by her own family, forgotten by history, remembered only as a ghost story whispered by hotel staff too afraid to tell guests the truth before they check in. I don't know if she meant to frighten me, or if she was simply still waiting, after all these decades, for someone, anyone, to finally see her and let her know she was not forgotten. I never went back to London after that trip. I don't think I ever will. And whenever someone asks me about staying in a 5-star hotel, I always tell them the same thing. Check the reviews carefully, ask about the room's history, and if a staff member ever looks at you with pity when you tell them your room number, take it as the warning it truly is, because some rooms are 5 stars on the outside and something else entirely once the lights go out.